In Return of the Jedi, we saw Darth Vader make his final choice. He lifts the Emperor, hurls him into the reactor, and saves his son. But the effort destroys his life support. Luke removes the mask, and Anakin Skywalker dies redeemed. That moment ends the Sith. The Empire falls, and the galaxy begins to heal. But what if, back in Revenge of the Sith, Vader killed Sidious first? In this version of the story, that's exactly what happens. And nothing turns out the same. Let's begin. The room on Coruscant was all cold metal and new scars. Fresh armor gripped ruined skin, every breath rasped through machines that weren't lungs. The man on the table stared into bright lights and listened to a sound that once belonged to someone else. Then the shadow approached, voice syrup smooth. "In your anger, you killed her." The sentence cut deeper than a blade. Mustafar's heat flashed behind his eyes. Padme collapsing on the landing pad. Obi-Wan's silhouette in the smoke. A grip around a throat he loved. Grief surged, then steadied. Not a howl, a line in the sand. Cuffs groaned and snapped. Surgical droids rolled and folded, as if squeezed by a giant hand. The figure in black swung his legs over the table, found the floor, and rose, unsteady, unyielding. He pulled the faceplate free. What stared back at the Emperor was burned and terrible and awake. "Look," he forced out. "Look at what you made." The smile didn't change. "Rest, my friend. Your mind is storm-tossed. I will guide." "You promised life," Vader said. "You used me to end it." Blue fire burst from the Emperor's hands. Lightning crawled over armor and bit every exposed nerve. Pain tried to drown him. Focus cut through. The black-gloved hand lifted, fingers closing. For a heartbeat, the old man's feet left the floor. Then his laughter came, and the storm doubled. Circuits shrieked, metal clenched, ozone stung. "Always beneath me," the Emperor hissed. "Apprentice, tool, slave." That word killed the thunder inside his head. Vader reached past the agony and the fury and touched the current that connects everything. In the robed folds near the Emperor's heart, something answered, the sleeping heat of a red crystal. A hidden saber woke and stabbed upward. Scarlet light punched through ribs. The volley of lightning died with a ragged gasp. Cloth darkened. Fingers scrabbled at nothing. The blade tore free, spun, and smacked into a waiting palm. "Your pride blinded you," Vader said low. The Emperor tried for one last trick. He found only night. Silence spilled across the chamber. The whisper that had steered a generation stopped. No triumph waited in that quiet, only the weight of everything already lost. Vader locked the mask back into place. The old hiss returned, colder, final. 4 Crimson Guards stepped into his path, staves crossed. Duty told them to stand, fear begged them not to. Vader didn't debate. The corridor beyond was empty, and the city outside glittered like a knife rack. On a small ship in hiding, an aide burst into a cramped cabin. Emergency transmission, every channel. Bail Organa keyed it open. Yoda and Obi-Wan leaned close. The hollow showed a black helm like a skull and the burned council chamber behind it. "Emperor Palpatine is dead," the voice declared. "Assassinated by the Jedi Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi." Bail's knuckles went white. "What is he playing at?" "I fought to protect the throne," the voice continued, iron flat. "By strength and by right I claim it. The Jedi will be hunted to the last." Clicks sounded. The upper half of the mask lifted. Under it, ruin and blue eyes Obi-Wan knew too well. "Anakin lives," Obi-Wan whispered. "Danger! Clear it is," Yoda murmured. "Paths! Clouded they are." "He wants you to chase him," Bail said. "He wants a public execution, yours or his. Either way, he wins the story. We vanish, deep, with the children." Obi-Wan swallowed. "He will search for them." "Then we learn patience," Bail said. "And we let his own empire swallow itself." Yoda nodded, old and resolute. "Wait, watch, survive." He closed his eyes, listening to currents only he could hear. "Into exile, go we must," he said at last. "Break it only when balance demands, and no sooner." On Coruscant, Moffs who were experts at smiling while they hid knives filed into a chamber that suddenly had a different gravity. Mos Amedda hovered. Grand Moff Tarkin observed. Vader didn't call for committees. He issued orders. Credits moved. Shipyards received new directives. Projects built to flatter an emperor's vanity died. Designs that could actually win dogfights came roaring back. CNR's hangars lit up at midnight. The TIE Advanced moved from prototype to limited runs. Advanced interceptor lines, stepping stones toward later high-performance doctrines, were pulled from drawers and pushed into testing. Kamino received a seal that brokered no discussion. More battalions. Faster. The cloners adjusted formulas and timelines. Vader overrode decommission plans with a single order, placing Kamino under direct military authority. It bought time, but not forever. But chronology isn't a switch. The men bred for the Republic watched years catch them fast. Inhibitor chips, once absolute, started fraying at the edges. Duty held. Habit cracked. Some troopers tightened ranks. Some disappeared at the edge of night and didn't come back. Where the new Emperor pressed the hardest, the galaxy broke the worst. On Chandrila, patrols marched through orchards. On Ryloth, doors were kicked a third time in a generation. Screenings turned into scorched districts. Smoke replaced speeches. Mon Mothma learned new routes from office to street. The morning her arrest notice moved across 10 desks, 9 slowed it, 1 didn't. The clerk who forwarded it also sent a message to a pilot he trusted with his life. By nightfall, she was gone, exfiltrated to deep cover before raiders reached her block. The Empire found a ransacked safe house and a cold kettle. Tarkin watched everything from Eriadu. He saw a machine trying to be a hammer. Hammers don't run empires. He began to recruit outside the vats, sons with hungry parents, daughters who wanted steady pay, people who would salute a banner if it meant their lights stayed on. Train them hard. Tell them they serve order, not a temper and a mask. Promise safety. Promise a future. Mos Amedda promised nothing. He listened. He met governors in rooms with heavy blinds and said only what they needed to hear to keep their chairs warm. Out beyond the core, the Jedi didn't shine. They endured. An old freighter with mismatched panels drifted from fuel depot to fuel depot. 2 children learned star names from a window. When they slept, they dreamed of light that hummed and crossed in the air. In daylight, a bearded man taught patience to a boy who could make small things move without touching them. A small green teacher showed a girl how to breathe until fear loosened its hold. No temple, no council, enough. Others chose fight over hiding. On a white salt world of wind, Bale's network became a living thing, routes, caches, call signs. In a dark cargo bay, a Togruta counted ships and held 2 names in tension, Anakin and Vader. She stayed in the gray, working through cutouts and couriers until the Civil War peaked. She made room in her heart for neither name. She focused on the work. By year's end, the Empire still wore its name. The seams showed. Logistics, always the quiet tyrant, turned on its makers. Freight rosters howled. Governors who knew how to push paper watched requisitions stamped immediate pile up like snow. Worlds that stayed neutral during the war suddenly found no was the only word they could afford. Vader felt the pressure shift. He answered the way he'd learned to answer everything, with more force. A whisper about a robed figure on Garel led to empty streets where buildings collapsed for being on the wrong corner. The quiet inside him didn't shrink. Tarkin sent a memo titled "Like a Grocery List." Recruitment quotas, shipyard schedules, continuity of governance. Mos Amedda passed it along with the expression of a man ordering lunch. No reply came. Tarkin had all the confirmation he needed. Year 2 was worse. Empires don't shatter cleanly. They crack along the lines they drew. Clones fought as if history depended on their discipline. Recruits fought as if survival depended on tomorrow's paycheck. You can tell the difference up close. On Belsavis, one gunship landing on the wrong pad turned a riot into a revolution. On Corellia, a cafeteria switched to cheaper CAF and triggered a strike. It ended when 6 managers vanished and returned a week later with better beans and crates of helmets. A name reached Vader on a dusty manifest, Quinlan Voss. Old shadow, old itch, he took the 501st himself. Commander Appo rode at his side, visor reflecting an empty blue sky. Boss Pity looked abandoned. Places that want to kill you often do. The tension in the air felt like a wire about to snap. Vader walked into it. The blast flowered white ahead of him, armor shattered. Orders died on Appo's lips as a bolt found his visor. The 501st, who had once marched up Jedi Temple steps through flame, found themselves funneled into alleys with too many angles and courtyards, designed by someone who understood their footing. They fought anyway, they always had. When the dust cleared, the colors had changed. Blue and white lay on the ground, new insignia rose from the rubble. Tarkin stepped out of shadow with the calm of a man entering a courtroom. "Lord Vader," he called. "Strength you have, suitability to rule you do not." Hundreds of blasters lifted, a red blade woke with no flourish. "Kneel," Vader said. Tarkin didn't. "Surrender now. Your loyalists will be reintegrated." The red stroke that took his head was a lesson. Surprise stunned the ring to stillness. When aim returned, the target didn't stay. He hit the ground among them hard enough to wobble knees. The first shockwave toppled a dozen. Then he was movement. Too fast, too close, unarguable. Bolts ricocheted into the wrong plates. Walls cracked. Helmets rang. In minutes, wind and breath were the only sounds. He lifted a small disc from dirt and thumbed it on. Masameda's image popped into the air, poised and lacquered until it saw who held the line. "Prepare for war," the vizier said, and the tremor he hid told more truth than the words. Metal crushed in a black fist. With Tarkin gone, the spine of the Imperial doctrine snapped. Sector fleets lost their common playbook overnight. Governors began improvising and colliding. Masks dropped across the galaxy. Governors who'd been waiting for someone else to jump felt the ground move and leapt to keep their footing. Fleets split, then split again. Supply lines tangled. The Empire's edges blurred. People chose sides, then changed sides, then tried simply to make it to next week. In a low-lit room above a hangar, Bail crossed out names. "No more shadows. We build." Ahsoka listened to a report from a clone who had walked away from everything except his conscience. She exhaled once. "Then, we begin." On Coruscant, the man in black slept in a tank and dreamed of a balcony on Naboo, a laugh under blue night. He woke to the same quiet inside his chest. The Force stirred with a familiar presence, bright as a beacon through fog. "Hello there?" Not a taunt, a location, a seeing stone older than most empires. He could have brought a fleet. He didn't. Some debts don't want witnesses. He went alone. The coordinates pointed to Tython. Wind and stone greeted him as the ship kissed down beside an ancient seeing stone. The ramp descended. A black figure started up the path. "Anakin," Obi-Wan said. He didn't shout. Vader didn't answer the name. He stepped into the circle and looked from one face to the other. Obi-Wan's beard had gathered winter. Yoda's eyes still held oceans. Red fire, blue and green answered. He struck first, heavy, certain, aimed to break. Obi-Wan turned the angle and bled the Force into the ground. Yoda slid along the blow and pricked at the armor seams, needle precise. The brutal, forward march that had ended armies had to become something tighter. Vader adjusted, swept, tried to split them. They refused to separate. "You were never patient," Obi-Wan said, blade locking for an instant with a squeal. "I mistook your patience for victory," Vader replied, ripping a trench in the stone with a sideways cut. "Wrong, that lesson was," Yoda said, bouncing off the breastplate to dart away before the gauntlet could catch him. They spilled off the ring into a maze of boulders where missteps punish arrogance. Vader turned the terrain into a weapon anyway, kicking shale in sheets, ripping a stone rib from the ground and hurling it like a harpoon. Blue bisected it. Green smacked another aside and returned a storm of quick stabs that made the red blade work high, low, high. He could have drowned them in bodies. He chose the duel. Pride, yes. Also truth. This was personal. "Why come alone?" Obi-Wan asked, angling with the wind. "Afraid of an audience?" "Afraid they'd see you," Vader said, and drove hard. Yoda burned a line across a forearm plate. Sparks flared and died. A pulse blasted both Jedi back, pebbles skittering like startled fish. The Seeing Stone tore free of its cradle and smashed between them, old carvings grating over rock. "Anger, blind it can," Yoda said, resetting his stance. "It clears the noise," Vader answered, and pressed. The red rhythm hammered at Obi-Wan's guard. The blue moved less than the feet behind it, borrowing momentum, never arguing with physics. When Vader repeated a pattern, Obi-Wan punished it with a short, clean riposte that left a new burn on black plates. Pressure thickened in the air, the fear that lived in Vader's orbit pressed down like iron. "I sense them," he said, not gloating, naming a fact. "The children." Obi-Wan's guard twitched by a hair. Vader took the angle. Sabers screamed together. Heat shimmered between faces inches apart. "You won't reach them," Obi-Wan said, "not even if you win here." "I reached them already." Weight, more will than muscle, pushed him toward the edge. Yoda stepped in, taking 3 heavy strikes that rattled bone and stone. The 4th he turned aside and slashed a bright line across the grill. Breathing grew louder, ragged at the edges. "You broke the galaxy for love," Obi-Wan said, blade steady. "This road doesn't end where you think." "It ends where I stop walking," Vader answered. No dance now, an attrition. Where he swung, one trapped. Where he cornered, the other shrank the board. A spire sheared and crashed. Dust hid footwork that left Obi-Wan on a better line. He used it. "I loved you," he said, "because truth matters." "You loved a story," Vader snapped, coming low, fast. 10 movements flickered in less than a second. Perfect only because the last had been perfect. Blue found a seam where a human heart might be if metal hadn't turned it. Red skated where a neck would have been if a pivot hadn't stolen the inches. Green slid between them like a third answer neither wanted to say out loud. Stone groaned and let go. They dropped with it, landing in stances that showed how long each had practiced, not dying. The end shape was clear now. Yoda chose to make it arrive. He hurled his saber end over end, a green ring through Gale, aimed not to kill but to force a choice. Vader parried it into a pillar. The blade buried itself with a deep hum. 2 heartbeats of blue alone followed. 2 was enough. Obi-Wan stepped in, not throat, not heart. The old schematics whispered of cooling lines under the right breast. The point bit in. Air learned a new route with an ugly sound. Vader rocked, somehow found his feet. The red blade dipped, lifted, refusal made visible. "Anakin," Obi-Wan breathed. The saber drooped and stayed. The mask turned toward him. The breathing stuttered. Then a hidden failsafe clicked, and the hiss returned, thin, desperate. "Kenobi," came the naked voice beneath the filter, recognition, not hatred. Yoda pulled Green free of stone and approached from the side, wary. Obi-Wan eased his blade lower, ready to raise in an instant. Vader looked at his hand, the faint tremor in his fingers. The red blade vanished. He went to one knee. Metal scraped rock. The catches at his jaw clicked. The mask came away. The face beneath had lost everything except the eyes of a boy who once dreamed under twin suns. "I tried to hold everything together," he said, voice rough and small. "Thought if I gripped hard enough, the inside would stop breaking." Obi-Wan's throat tightened. Yoda's ears dipped a fraction. "The war made me into a hammer," Anakin said. "After that, all I could see were nails." He lifted an empty palm near Obi-Wan's blade. Blue light warmed scarred skin. "Tell my children," he whispered. "Tell them I saw them." "Tell them yourself," Obi-Wan said, almost inaudible. A thin smile touched wrecked lips. "My story ends here." The Force shivered in that peculiar way it does when a great weight leaves the table. One breath. Another. No more. Red metal clicked against stone. Blue withdrew. Green dimmed. They kept silent company until the wind carried dust away. Word outruns ships when people want it to. Vader is dead. Didn't need proof, only a voice willing to say it with calm. That voice multiplied. In mess halls and market lanes, the truth took shape. Bale's fleets lit their transponders. Cells stepped out of shadows and called themselves what they'd always been, a rebellion. Masameta tried a balcony speech about continuity. The palace doors opened to a tide, not a crowd. Troopers, clones with old paint and conscripts with scuffed plates, looked at each other and set rifles down. In the great hall where Palpatine had practiced smiling, statues fell slow and dignified. The Senate, a thing that had been breathing in secret, exhaled in public. Bail stood at the center with tired eyes and used words the chamber hadn't heard since before the war. We the people. Planets took stock. Some governors called elections, some vanished. Habit alone stopped moving men to reload. The Empire didn't vanish, it molted. Freight still moved, ports still stamped. The difference was the signature at the bottom. That's what hearts notice. In a hangar, Ahsoka put a hand on the shoulder of a clone who had fought for too many flags. She didn't promise peace. She asked for help building it. Shadows didn't disappear, they learned patience. In back rooms, old insignia exchanged hands. Triangles were sketched on napkins. Darkness waits well. But for the first time in years, there was room for hope to breathe without apology. Years later, on a hill that would one day be a campus, two remotes bobbed in the air. Luke laughed and stilled both with a careless gesture. Leia didn't raise a hand, she looked at one, and it blinked off, then on, surprised into obedience. Again, Obi-Wan said, failing to hide his smile. The order that returned didn't try to become what it had been. Yoda said it aloud one evening to a circle of learners in mismatched robes. Fear of attachment, our flaw was, balance, learn we must. Love, forbid we shall not. But ruled by love, we cannot. Ahsoka took in the ones who came with scars that didn't show, and taught them to be more than their pain. She argued doctrine with Obi-Wan and sent students to him for the gentleness deserts had taught him. The galaxy didn't heal in a montage. Some worlds stayed hungry longer than any declaration could excuse. Some families learned that victory doesn't restore those who bought it. Archives burned by white and blue boots had to be rebuilt by people telling stories out loud and writing them down by hand, because no holocron survived to carry them. On Theed, rain softened the air. Two young figures stood before a stone door. Bail waited under the portico and left them to the quiet. Padme's name didn't answer. Stone rarely does. Leia touched cool letters with careful fingertips, the way you check for fever. Luke folded his hands the way he'd seen his teacher do when there were no words to give thanks. He wanted to be better, Luke said. Leia tried to imagine the woman who had stood straight in rooms full of wrong laughter. Would that woman forgive the man who stood over the world that killed her? Maybe forgiveness was too small a word. She chose a promise instead. We will be, she said. On Coruscant, courts sifted the men who had signed orders that erased blocks from maps. Some went to prison. Some faced mercy they hadn't shown. Mos Amedda survived by being useful in ways no one liked to admit, keeping files intact when others might burn them, shepherding departments away from their worst instincts. Bail didn't enjoy needing him. He needed him anyway, for a while. A mid-rim yard that had once made knives for tyrants took a contract to build hospital ships. Engineers who'd drawn thin-winged interceptors designed things that wouldn't shear apart when the pilot wanted to come home. A fleet to be seen, not feared, began as lines on drafting boards. In a quiet office that smelled of old wood, Obi-Wan took a black cheek plate from a drawer. It had frightened children once. He'd meant to destroy it a dozen times. Tonight he set his fingers on it long enough for the room to stop spinning in his memory. You were a good man, he said to the empty air. Lost, then found, too late for you, not too late for them. He slid the metal back and walked to the training floor. Two small figures waited with wooden blades and bright eyes. He bowed. They bowed back. The day's work began. People have argued what balance means for as long as anyone has told this story. Light triumphant? Scales steadied? In this timeline, it isn't a speech. It's a choice, a man who finally set his weapon down and accepted the cost of every step behind him. His teacher honored the end he earned, not the terror he wielded. His children grew in a world where their name was no longer a secret or a threat, but a promise to do better than the ones who came before. What if Darth Vader killed Darth Sidious? Maybe the Empire would have cracked quicker. Maybe the war would have bent instead of breaking. Maybe victory feels less like fireworks and more like a long breath after years of holding one. One thing doesn't change. Redemption opens from the inside. No one can shove you through, you walk. If you liked this alternate path, hit that like button and subscribe for more Star Wars stories, and may the Force be with you.